In a quiet little town surrounded by lush green hills, there lived a boy named Ethan. He was just 10 years old but had already faced more challenges than most people do in a lifetime. From the day he was born, doctors knew something wasn't quite right with his tiny heart. It was weak, struggling to pump blood through his small body like it was supposed to. They called it a congenital heart condition, a big phrase that meant Ethan's heart hadn't formed properly before he came into the world. Despite all of this, Ethan had an unbreakable spirit. His parents often marveled at how cheerful he remained, even when he couldn't run around or play soccer like other kids his age. Instead, Ethan found joy in simpler things, drawing pictures, reading comic books, and dreaming up stories about superheroes who always saved the day. His room was filled with colorful sketches of caped crusaders battling villains and rescuing those in need. To Ethan, these weren't just drawings. They were reminders that good could triumph over evil, no matter how hard things seemed. Ethan's parents did everything they could to give him a normal life. They took him to countless doctor appointments, followed strict diets, and kept him away from anything too strenuous. But as time went on, Ethan's health began to decline. The medicines stopped working as well as they used to, and his energy levels dropped drastically. Even walking short distances left him out of breath. Still, Ethan never complained. He smiled, through it all, holding on to hope that one day things would get better. That hope rested on finding a donor heart. A healthy heart from someone willing to save another life after their own ended. It was a long shot, but Ethan's family clung to it tightly. Every night they prayed for a miracle, and every morning they woke up hoping today might be the day they'd hear the news they'd been waiting for. Dr. Lisa Martinez, Ethan's cardiologist, became a constant presence in their lives. She was a kind woman with warm eyes and a determined attitude. Dr. Martinez spent hours explaining procedures, answering questions, and reassuring Ethan's parents that they were doing everything possible to keep him stable. Yet deep down she worried. Time was not on Ethan's side. His heart was growing weaker, and without a transplant soon, the chances of survival were slim. One afternoon, while Ethan rested in his hospital bed, Dr. Martinez sat with his parents in a small meeting room. The walls were bare except for a calendar marked with important dates. "We're running out of options," she said softly, her voice heavy with concern. "If we don't find a match soon—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Ethan's mother wiped away tears while his father stared at the floor, gripping his hands tightly together. But despite the grim reality, Dr. Martinez refused to give up. She promised to keep fighting for Ethan, to explore every possibility, until the very end. For now, all they could do was wait and pray for a miracle to arrive. Little did they know, fate was about to step in, though not in the way anyone expected. The quiet hum of the hospital faded into the background as Ethan's parents sat by his bedside, holding on to fragile hope. It was late evening, and the sky outside had turned a deep shade of purple, dotted with stars that seemed to twinkle faintly as if whispering secrets of what lay ahead. Ethan slept soundly, his chest rising and falling in uneven rhythms, a reminder of the battle his little heart was fighting every second. Dr. Lisa Martinez moved briskly down the hallway, her mind focused on the endless list of tasks before her. She glanced at her phone for what felt like the 100th time that day, checking for updates or messages about potential donor matches. Finding a heart donor was like searching for a needle in a haystack. The odds were slim, but giving up wasn't an option, not when it came to someone like Ethan. And then, just as she reached the nurse's station, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with an incoming call from the Regional Organ Procurement Organization. Dr. Martinez froze for a moment, her heart skipping a beat. Calls like this always carried weight. They could mean life or death for patients waiting on the transplant list. Taking a deep breath, she answered. "This is Dr. Martinez," she said, her voice steady despite the swirl of emotions inside her. On the other end of the line, a coordinator explained that a donor heart had become available. A young child, tragically taken too soon, had left behind the gift of life. After running tests and cross-checking compatibility, the medical team confirmed It was a perfect match for Ethan. For a brief moment, Dr. Martinez felt relief wash over her like a tidal wave. This was the miracle they'd been praying for. But she didn't have time to celebrate. Every second mattered now. Donor organs, especially hearts, had a limited window of viability once removed from the donor's body. The clock was already ticking and there was no room for error. With urgency in her step, Dr. Martinez hurried to Ethan's room to deliver the news. When she walked in, Ethan's parents looked up, their faces etched with worry. They must have sensed something in her expression because their eyes widened with anticipation. "I have some good news," Dr. Martinez began, her tone soft but firm. "A donor heart has been found. It's a match for Ethan." Ethan's mother gasped, covering her mouth with trembling hands. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she turned to look at her sleeping son. His father buried his face in his palms, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For so long, they'd held on to hope against all odds, and now it seemed their prayers had finally been answered. Dr. Martinez quickly explained the next steps. The donor heart was located several states away, which meant it would need to be transported via a carefully coordinated effort involving planes, ambulances, and police escorts. Everything hinged on precision timing. If anything went wrong, if the organ arrived too late or was mishandled, the consequences would be devastating. "We'll do everything we can to make sure this works," Dr. Martinez assured them, placing a reassuring hand on Ethan's mother's shoulder. "This is Ethan's chance." As the night wore on, preparations kicked into high gear. Medical teams sprang into action, organizing logistics and ensuring every detail was accounted for. Back in Ethan's room, his parents stayed awake, watching over him as if guarding a treasure more precious than gold. They whispered words of encouragement, telling him stories about superheroes who never gave up, even when things looked impossible. Outside the hospital, 2 officers, Logan and Carter, received their assignment. They were tasked with escorting the donor heart during its final leg of the journey through their city. Neither man realized the gravity of the situation. To them, it was just another job, another routine task. Little did they know their actions, or lack thereof, would determine whether Ethan's story ended in triumph or tragedy. The stage was set. Hope hung precariously in the balance, tethered to the fragile thread of human effort and timing. For Ethan, the hours ahead would decide not only his fate, but also the legacy he might leave behind. The early hours of the morning brought a flurry of activity as the donor heart began its journey across state lines. Medical teams worked tirelessly to ensure the organ was carefully preserved, packing it in a specialized container designed to maintain the exact conditions needed for its survival. Every detail mattered: the temperature, the solution it was submerged in, even the gentle handling during transport. This wasn't just an organ, it was a lifeline, a second chance at life. For Ethan. As the heart made its way closer to the city where Ethan waited, officers Logan and Carter received their instructions. They were seasoned officers, known for their years of service and calm demeanor under pressure. On paper, they seemed like the perfect choice for such a critical mission. But as fate would have it, complacency crept into their mindset almost immediately. Logan, a tall man with graying hair and a no-nonsense attitude, glanced at his partner Carter as they climbed into their patrol car. "Another escort job," he muttered, rolling his eyes. "You'd think they could find someone else to babysit a cooler." Carter chuckled, adjusting his seatbelt. "Relax, Logan. It's not like this thing is going anywhere. We've got plenty of time." Their dismissive attitude set the tone for what was about to unfold. Neither officer fully grasped the urgency of their task. To them, transporting a donor organ felt routine, almost mundane. They didn't stop to consider that inside that insulated container lay the hopes and dreams of a family, and the only chance for a young boy to survive. The first red flag came when Logan suggested stopping for coffee. It had been a long night, and both men were feeling sluggish. "What's the harm?" Logan reasoned. "We're ahead of schedule anyway. No one's going to miss us for 10 minutes. Carter hesitated but ultimately agreed. After all, what could go wrong? The heart was still miles away, and there was no immediate rush, or so they thought. Pulling into a nearby cafe, they stepped out of the car, leaving the precious cargo unattended in the back seat. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Dr. Martinez paced nervously outside Ethan's room. She checked her watch repeatedly, calculating how much time they had before the transplant window closed. Ischemic time, the period during which the heart could safely remain outside the body, was limited. Even the slightest delay could compromise the organ's viability. Yet, she trusted the system. She had to believe that everyone involved understood the stakes. Back on the road, Logan and Carter returned to their patrol car, sipping their coffees as if nothing unusual was happening. The sun was beginning to rise, casting golden rays over the city streets. Traffic was light, giving them a false sense of security. When dispatch called to check on their progress, Logan waved off any concerns. "We're good," he said confidently, his voice tinged with arrogance. "No issues here. Everything's running smoothly." Dispatch tried to press further, emphasizing the importance of sticking to the timeline, but Logan cut them off. "Look, we've done this 100 times. Stop worrying so much. We'll be there when we're supposed to be." Unbeknownst to them, the medical team coordinating the transport was growing increasingly anxious. Delays were adding up. First, due to unexpected weather patterns affecting the flight carrying the organ. Then because of Logan and Carter's detour. Each minute wasted pushed the operation closer to disaster. By the time the officers resumed their route, traffic had begun to build. Cars lined the roads, inching forward in frustration. Logan drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, irritated by the sudden congestion. "This is ridiculous," he grumbled. "Who planned this route?" Carter shrugged, scrolling through his phone instead of focusing on the task at hand. Neither man considered calling ahead to alert the hospital or finding an alternate route. Their lack of urgency bordered on negligence, though neither admitted it aloud. At the hospital, Ethan's parents sensed something was amiss. The doctors who had been optimistic earlier now wore grim expressions. Ethan's father approached Dr. Martinez, his voice trembling. "Is everything okay? Why haven't we heard anything?" Dr. Martinez forced a smile, though her eyes betrayed her worry. "There have been some delays, but I'm sure everything will work out," she reassured him. Inside, however, doubt gnawed at her. She knew better than anyone that timing was everything. One misstep, one careless decision, could undo all their efforts. And so, while Ethan slept peacefully in his hospital bed, unaware of the chaos unfolding around him, the fragile chain holding his future together began to weaken. The actions, or inaction, of two officers miles away threatened to unravel the miracle his family had prayed for. Time was slipping away, and with it, the promise of a new beginning. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting sharp shadows on the bustling city. Streets below, officers Logan and Carter, still sipping their lukewarm coffee, finally approached the last stretch of their route. Traffic had slowed to a crawl, and the frustration in Logan's voice grew louder with each passing minute. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "We should have been there by now." Carter glanced at his phone again, scrolling absent-mindedly through social media. He seemed unfazed by the mounting tension, unaware or perhaps indifferent to the gravity of their delay. Neither man realized that every second wasted was chipping away at Ethan's fragile chance at life. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Dr. Lisa Martinez felt her stomach tighten into knots. She paced outside the operating room, clutching her clipboard as she tried to calculate how much time they had left. The transplant window was closing rapidly, and without the donor heart arriving soon, the entire procedure would become impossible. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios, but she forced herself to stay composed for Ethan's family. Ethan's parents sat anxiously in the waiting area, their eyes glued to the clock on the wall. They exchanged worried glances, sensing something wasn't right. Ethan's mother clutched her husband's hand tightly, her knuckles white with tension. "Why isn't anyone telling us anything?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "They said the heart was coming. What's taking so long?" Dr. Martinez approached them cautiously, her expression calm but tinged with concern. "There's been a slight delay. she admitted gently, choosing her words carefully. But the team is doing everything possible to ensure the heart arrives safely. Please try to stay hopeful. Her reassurance did little to ease their anxiety. Ethan's father leaned forward, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions. Hopeful? How can we be hopeful when no one seems to know what's going on? Every minute matters, doesn't it? She nodded solemnly, unable to deny the truth of his words. Inside, she cursed the system, wishing there was some way to speed up the process. But all she could do now was wait and pray that the organ would arrive in time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Logan and Carter pulled up to the hospital entrance. By this point, sweat had begun to bead on Logan's forehead, not from physical exertion, but from the realization that they might have made a grave mistake. As they stepped out of the patrol car and retrieved the insulated container holding the donor heart, they noticed the medical staff rushing toward them with urgent expressions. One of the nurses quickly grabbed the container and hurried inside, shouting instructions to prepare the operating room. Logan and Carter followed behind, feeling uneasy but still not fully grasping the severity of their negligence. In the hospital lab, Dr. Martinez and her team sprang into action. With careful precision, they opened the container and examined the heart. Their faces fell almost instantly. The organ, once vibrant and full of promise, now showed signs of damage. Prolonged exposure without proper preservation had caused irreversible harm. It was no longer viable for transplantation. Dr. Martinez stood frozen, staring at the heart in disbelief. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned to face the rest of the team. "It's too late," she said quietly, her voice heavy with sorrow. "We can't use it." The room fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. Nurses exchanged devastated looks, while technicians hung their heads in defeat. All their efforts, all their planning, had been undone by a series of avoidable mistakes. When Dr. Martinez walked back into the waiting area, she found Ethan's parents sitting exactly where she'd left them. Their hopeful expressions shattered the moment they saw her face. Before she even spoke, they knew the news wasn't good. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Martinez began, her voice breaking despite her best efforts to remain professional. "The heart, it didn't make it in time. We couldn't save it." Ethan's mother let out a strangled cry, collapsing into her husband's arms. Tears streamed down her face as she buried her head against his chest. Ethan's father stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched tightly as if trying to hold himself together. For a brief moment, the world seemed to stop spinning. Dr. Martinez stayed with them, offering quiet words of comfort, though she knew nothing could soften the blow. Outside the hospital, Officers Logan and Carter stood awkwardly near their patrol car, watching as the medical team dispersed with somber expressions. For the first time, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. They had failed, not just Ethan, but his entire FA. The hospital corridors, usually bustling with activity, now felt eerily silent. The weight of what had just happened hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and suffocating. Ethan's parents sat frozen in the waiting room, their faces pale and drawn. They clung to each other as if letting go would mean losing the last shred of strength they had left. The news Dr. Martinez delivered still echoed in their minds, a cruel twist of fate that snatched away the miracle they had prayed for. Ethan's mother sobbed uncontrollably, her cries muffled against her husband's chest. He held her tightly, his own tears streaming silently down his face. For years they had fought tirelessly for their son, attending endless doctor appointments, following strict medical routines, and holding on to hope even when it felt impossible. And now, after all that struggle, the one chance they had been waiting for was gone, all because of someone else's carelessness. Dr. Martinez lingered nearby, her heart breaking for the family she had grown so close to over the months. She wanted to say something, anything to ease their pain, but no words seemed adequate. Instead, she placed a gentle hand on Ethan's father's shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she whispered again, her voice trembling. "We did everything we could." Ethan's father looked up at her, his eyes red and swollen. Everything? He asked bitterly, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions. If everything was done, why is my son still lying there without a heart? Why didn't anyone stop those officers from wasting time? His words cut through the silence like a knife. Dr. Martinez flinched but didn't pull away. She knew he wasn't angry at her. He was angry at the system, at the officers, at the unfairness of it all. But most of all, he was angry because anger was easier than accepting the unbearable truth, that Ethan's life was slipping away, and there was nothing more they could do to save him. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, Officers Logan and Carter stood awkwardly by their patrol car, shifting uncomfortably under the disapproving stares of hospital staff. Word of their negligence had spread quickly, and whispers followed them wherever they went. Nurses shot them venomous glares while doctors avoided eye contact altogether. It was clear that everyone blamed them for what had happened. Logan tried to brush it off, muttering to Carter about how people were overreacting. "It's not like we meant for this to happen," he said defensively, though his tone lacked conviction. Deep down, he knew they had messed up. But admitting fault felt too painful, too humiliating. Carter, however, couldn't shake the image of Ethan's devastated parents from his mind. He replayed the scene over and over again, their tear-streaked faces, the way they clung to each other as if bracing for impact. Guilt gnawed at him relentlessly, eating away at his confidence. For the first time in his career, he questioned whether he was cut out for this line of work. Back inside, Ethan remained unconscious in his hospital bed, oblivious to the chaos surrounding him. His breathing was shallow, labored, as his weak heart struggled to keep going. Monitors beeped steadily beside him, tracking every heartbeat, every breath. To anyone watching, it was a stark reminder of how fragile life truly was. Ethan's parents refused to leave his side. They took turns sitting by his bedside, holding his small hand and whispering words of love and encouragement. "You're our hero, buddy," his father murmured softly, brushing a strand of hair from Ethan's forehead. "Always remember that." Despite their grief, they tried to stay strong for their son. They read him stories, showed him the superhero drawings he loved so much, and reminded him of all the adventures they'd promised to take once he got better. Each word carried a bittersweet ache, knowing those promises might never come true. The hours passed. Ethan's condition continued to deteriorate. His heart, already weakened by years of fighting, couldn't hold on much longer. Doctors monitored him closely, offering updates that grew increasingly grim. There was nothing left to do but wait and prepare for the inevitable. For Ethan's parents, the days blurred together into a haze of heartbreak and exhaustion. Friends and family visited, bringing food and condolences, but nothing could fill the void left by the loss of hope. Even the smallest tasks, answering phone calls, signing papers, felt insurmountable. In the end, it wasn't anger or blame that consumed them. It was grief. A deep, unrelenting sorrow that settled into their bones and refused to let go. They had lost more than just a donor heart. They had lost the future they had dreamed of for their son. And as they sat vigil beside Ethan's bed, holding onto his tiny hand, they prepared themselves for the hardest goodbye of all. The tragedy of Ethan's story didn't stay confined within the walls of the hospital. News of what had happened spread quickly, first through whispers among staff and visitors, then across the town, and eventually far beyond. Social media lit up with posts about the young boy whose life could have been saved, if not for the negligence of two officers tasked with protecting the precious cargo meant to give him a second chance. The outrage was immediate and fierce. Protesters gathered outside the police station holding signs that read, "Justice for Ethan and negligence costs lives." Parents brought their children, some clutching superhero drawings inspired by Ethan's love for caped crusaders. The crowd grew larger each day, united in grief and anger over what they saw as an unforgivable failure. Local news outlets covered the protests extensively, airing interviews with heartbroken families who had also waited on organ transplant lists. Each story added fuel to the fire, amplifying calls for accountability. Ethan's parents became reluctant, but determined advocates. Still reeling from their unimaginable loss, They found themselves thrust into the spotlight, speaking at press conferences and sharing their son's story with anyone who would listen. They spoke not just for Ethan, but for every patient waiting for a donor organ, for every family clinging to hope while time ticked away. Their message was simple yet powerful. No one should suffer because of carelessness or arrogance. "We trusted the system," Ethan's father said during one emotional interview, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "We trusted that when we were told help was coming, it would arrive in time. But instead, our son died, not because there wasn't a heart available, but because people failed him." His words struck a chord with millions. Viewers flooded social media with messages of support, vowing to honor Ethan's memory by becoming organ donors themselves. Others demanded stricter protocols for transporting donor organs, pointing out the glaring flaws exposed by this heartbreaking case. Petitions calling for reform garnered hundreds of thousands of signatures, putting pressure on lawmakers to act. Meanwhile, officers Logan and Carter faced mounting scrutiny. An internal investigation revealed critical errors in judgment, including their decision to take an unauthorized coffee break and their dismissive attitude toward dispatch warnings about delays. Both men were placed on administrative leave pending disciplinary action, though many felt this punishment was too lenient given the consequences of their actions. The public demanded more than suspensions. They wanted justice. Some called for criminal charges, arguing that Logan and Carter's negligence amounted to reckless endangerment. Others pushed for mandatory training programs to ensure officers understood the life or death stakes involved in missions like these. The debate raged on, dividing communities and sparking conversations about systemic failures in emergency services. In response, local officials announced plans to review existing procedures for organ transport. Medical experts, law enforcement, leaders, and advocacy groups came together to propose reforms aimed at preventing similar tragedies in the future. Ideas included implementing real-time GPS tracking for donor organs, requiring dual officer teams for high-stakes escorts, and establishing direct communication channels between medical teams and transport personnel. As the movement gained momentum, Ethan's name became synonymous with change. His parents worked tirelessly alongside activists to push legislation forward, ensuring their son's legacy wouldn't be defined solely by his death, but also by the lives he inspired others to save. Schools began teaching students about organ donation, using Ethan's story to highlight its importance. Hospitals held memorial events in his honor, raising funds to support families navigating the same difficult journey. Even those who hadn't known Ethan personally felt moved by his story. Strangers sent letters and handmade cards to his parents, expressing condolences and gratitude for shining a light on such a vital issue. One woman wrote, "I signed up to be an organ donor today because of your son. He may be gone, but his spirit lives on in the lives he will help save." Through it all, Ethan's parents carried their grief with quiet dignity. Though nothing could ease the pain of losing their beloved boy, they found solace in knowing his story had sparked meaningful change. Every new policy, every donation sign-up, every moment of awareness brought them a small measure of peace. And so even in the depths of their sorrow, they chose to focus on hope, not just for themselves, but for everyone still waiting for a miracle. Ethan's heart may have stopped beating, but his legacy continued to grow, touching hearts and saving. Ethan's final days were a blur of quiet moments and overwhelming grief. His parents stayed by his side, never leaving the hospital room for more than a few minutes at a time. They held his hand, read him stories, and whispered words of love, even though they knew he could no longer hear them. The machines that had once beeped steadily now emitted slow, irregular rhythms, a haunting reminder of how fragile life truly was. On the morning Ethan passed away, the sun rose in soft hues of pink and orange, casting a warm glow over the hospital windows. It felt cruelly ironic that the world outside seemed so alive when their own world was about to shatter. Ethan's breathing grew shallower, his chest rising and falling with increasing difficulty. His mother leaned close, brushing her fingers gently across his forehead. "You're our hero, sweetheart," she murmured, tears streaming down her face. Always remember that. When the monitors finally went silent, signaling the end of Ethan's battle, the room fell heavy with an unbearable stillness. For a long moment, no one moved or spoke. Then, as if breaking free from a trance, Ethan's father pulled his wife into his arms, holding her tightly as sobs racked both their bodies. Nurses entered quietly to turn off the machines, offering quiet condolences before stepping out to give the family privacy. The funeral took place on a crisp autumn day, the kind Ethan would have loved. Friends, family, teachers, and even strangers filled the church, spilling out onto the steps outside. Many wore superhero pins, a nod to Ethan's passion for drawing heroes who always saved the day. His coffin was adorned with flowers and sketches. He had created bright, colorful images of caped figures soaring through the skies. Atop it all sat a small framed photo of Ethan smiling brightly, his eyes full of life. During the service, his parents shared memories of their son, the way he lit up any room he entered, the endless creativity he poured into his drawings, and the unwavering optimism he showed despite his struggles. "Ethan taught us what it means to be brave," his father said, his voice cracking but resolute. "He may not have worn a cape, but he was a hero in every sense of the word." The crowd listened intently, some wiping away tears while others nodded in agreement. When the eulogy ended, the pastor invited attendees to share their own reflections. One by one, people approached the podium. Teachers recalled Ethan's kindness. Classmates spoke of his infectious laugh, and neighbors described how his cheerful presence brightened their lives. A young girl shyly stepped forward, clutching a drawing of her own. "This is Ethan as a superhero," she said softly, holding up the picture for everyone to see. "He's flying because he's saving the world." As the ceremony concluded, mourners gathered outside to release balloons into the sky, a mix of reds, blues, and yellows swirling upward like a burst of hope. Each balloon carried a message written by those who loved Ethan. "Thank you for inspiring me. I'll never forget your smile, and you're my hero." Watching the balloons drift higher and higher, Ethan's parents clung to each other, finding comfort in knowing their son's spirit would live on. In the weeks that followed, Ethan's story continued to inspire action. His parents channeled their pain into purpose, founding a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness about organ donation and advocating for systemic reforms. They named it Ethan's Heart Foundation, a tribute to the boy whose dream of being a superhero came true, not in comic books, but in real life. The foundation worked tirelessly to educate communities about the importance of becoming donors, hosting workshops, school programs, and public events. They partnered with hospitals and law enforcement agencies to implement stricter protocols for transporting organs, ensuring no family would ever endure the same heartbreak again. Every success brought them closer to healing, turning their personal tragedy into a beacon of hope for others. To honor Ethan's memory, a mural was painted on the wall of the local children's hospital. It depicted Ethan standing tall in a vibrant superhero costume, his cape billowing behind him as he reached out to save another child. Beneath the image were the words, "Even in the darkest times, heroes rise." Though Ethan's heart had stopped beating, his legacy pulsed stronger than ever. Through his story, countless lives were touched, transformed, and ultimately saved. And in the hearts of those who loved him, Ethan remained forever alive. A true hero who changed the world, one act of courage at a time. Months after Ethan's passing, the impact of his story continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could have anticipated. His parents threw themselves into their nonprofit, Ethan's Heart Foundation, determined to ensure that his death would not be in vain. They traveled across cities and towns, speaking at schools, community centers, and hospitals, sharing Ethan's journey and urging others to consider organ donation. Their message was simple, yet profound. One person's choice to donate can save multiple lives and sometimes even inspire a movement. The foundation quickly gained momentum, attracting volunteers and supporters from all walks of life. Local businesses donated funds, artists created murals inspired by Ethan's story, and schools began incorporating lessons about organ donation into their curriculums. A national campaign launched under the slogan, "Be Someone's Hero," encouraging people to register as donors. Within its first year, thousands signed up, many citing Ethan's legacy as their motivation. One of the most significant changes came through legislation. Dubbed the Ethan Act, new laws were passed to overhaul the system for transporting donor organs. Real-time GPS tracking became mandatory, ensuring medical teams could monitor the location and condition of organs at every step of the journey. Law enforcement officers assigned to escort missions now underwent specialized training, emphasizing the critical importance of their role in saving lives. Dispatch systems were upgraded to allow direct communication between medical coordinators and transport teams, eliminating delays caused by miscommunication. These reforms weren't just symbolic, they made a tangible difference. In the months following the implementation of the Ethan Act, transplant success rates improved significantly. Families who had once faced uncertainty during organ transport expressed relief, knowing that stricter protocols were in place to safeguard their loved ones' chances at survival. Hospitals reported fewer incidents of missed timelines, thanks to coordinated efforts between medical staff, law enforcement, and transportation services. For Ethan's parents, these victories brought a sense of purpose amidst their grief. Though they still missed their son deeply, they found solace in knowing that his story had sparked meaningful change. Every time they received an email or letter from someone whose life had been saved because of a donated organ, they felt a flicker of hope reignite within them. One recipient, a young girl named Lily, sent a heartfelt note along with a drawing of herself holding hands with a superhero labeled Ethan. Her words brought tears to their eyes. "Thank you for sharing your son with me. Because of him, I get to grow up." The mural dedicated to Ethan outside the Children's Hospital became a gathering spot for families awaiting transplants. Parents brought their kids to see it, using the image of Ethan as a symbol of resilience and courage. Teachers used it as a teaching tool, reminding students that even ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. The vibrant colors and bold imagery served as a constant reminder that heroes exist in real life, and sometimes they come in the form of a brave little boy with a big heart. As years passed, Ethan's memory remained alive not only in his hometown, but across the nation. Annual events were held in his honor, including a hero run, where participants dressed as superheroes to raise money for organ donation awareness. Local artists created sculptures, paintings, and songs inspired by his story, each piece adding another layer to his enduring legacy. Schools named scholarships after him, awarding them to students who demonstrated kindness, creativity, and perseverance, qualities Ethan had embodied throughout his short life. Even officers Logan and Carter, though initially vilified, eventually found redemption through reflection. After months of grappling with guilt, they approached Ethan's parents to express their remorse. It wasn't easy. Standing face to face with the family they had unwittingly failed required immense humility. But Ethan's parents, moved by their sincerity, accepted their apology, not for their own sake, but for the greater good. Together, they worked to educate other officers about the gravity of their responsibilities, turning a painful chapter into a lesson for future generations. The end. Ethan's story transcended tragedy. What began as a heartbreaking loss transformed into a beacon of hope, illuminating the power of compassion, advocacy, and resilience. His name became synonymous with courage, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, we have the ability to make a difference. And though his heart stopped beating long ago, Ethan's spirit lived on in every life saved, every policy changed, and every person inspired to be someone's hero.